Welcome to our third Freeport meeting, first one in 5. I've got some apologies. Douglas Chapman is working, he's in Westminster. Annabelle Ewing can't come, Chillian Somerville can't come, Murdo Fraser can't come, Alex Rowley and Claire Baker send their apologies. Elizabeth Smith didn't reply, neither did Mark Ruskell, neither did Ross McCall or Alexander Stewart. And every councillor in the area, within the Freeport area, was invited, and none of them have responded, and none of them are here. And the leader of Fife Council was also invited and hasn't responded, so that's that. So, 4 guest speakers. Sara Salyers, who you all know, I'm sure. John Forbes is a very interested member of the public who has done a lot of research into Freeports. Julie McAnulty from ISP, and Neil Hanvey, as you all know, is the MP for Kirkcaldy Cowdenbeath and has an interest in this as well. So I'm going to hand you over first to Sara.
My apologies for pushing in first. You're going to hear a lot of information about what Freeports really mean. Many of you already have heard a lot about Freeports and what they represent. You might have heard how much good they're going to do for the Scottish economy and for the net zero targets and jobs, and and with net zero you assume it's going to be environmentally friendly. Well, you're going to hear that that is not the case. What's coming up is an absolute disaster. And I want to lead off by putting in some background to what my fellow speakers are going to tell you. The first question, when you begin to realise just how hellish what we're looking at is likely to be, is how do we stop it? What are the grounds on which we can stop it? You know, we're used to feeling absolutely helpless and powerless, but there are some things that you really need to know. You need to know that the territorial assets of Scotland, every square inch, about down to as far as you can go in the earth, to hundreds of feet up, and 120 miles, I think. Neil, is it out into the sea?
200.
Is it 200? Thank you. Is part of the territorial domain, that which Scotland owns. Now you need to know, and we need to know, exactly who owns it. You need to also know that, you know, the UK crown. You know, there's a UK crown. Charlie's king of the UK. Actually, that's a lie. There's no such thing. There's an English crown and there's a Scottish crown. And it's the English crown that he takes his oath under and to. And Scotland's is just kind of added into that old English coronation oath. But Scotland's crown still remains. It is there in law. It's never gone anywhere. So you need to know the difference here. In England, the crown owns, well, I'll read you this. Conventional feudal theory and practice was based in England and elsewhere on the premise that a kingdom was first and foremost a feudal entity, and in that sense the property of its king or queen. In Scotland's feudal system, this situation was radically tempered by the crown's status as representative of the community of the realm, which vested that ownership in the sovereignty of the people. You own, I own, we own every last square inch of Scotland, which is vested in the sovereignty of the community of the realm. That's us. I'll go on. Crown property rights in Scots law, which are an important part of Scotland's system of land ownership, are also distinct from crown property rights in the rest of the UK and belong to Scotland as a sovereign territorial nation. Scotland's rights of sovereignty over its territory are vested in the Crown, with its distinct constitutional and legal identity in Scotland under Scots law, compared to the Crown in the rest of the United Kingdom under English law. This distinct identity was not affected by the Union of the Crowns in 1603 and has continued since the Treaty of Union in 1707, when Scotland ceased to be an independent state but continued to be a sovereign territorial nation. So how come our territorial assets are being disposed of without so much as a consultation with the people who own them? What is happening is that Scotland's territorial assets are being administered in a form of trust, worse, under the right of the English Crown. There is nothing in the constitutional settlement that underpins the Treaty of Union that allows that. The Queen, who negotiated and prosecuted that treaty, Anne, took an oath. It's called the Scottish Oath of Accession, in which she swore to protect and keep inviolate the rights, the Scottish Crown and its rights, rents and privileges. She wasn't taking an oath to herself, she was taking an oath to the community of the realm, the Crown of Scotland. So she had no authority to transfer Scotland's Crown territorial rights into a new United Kingdom. The parliaments neither of Scotland nor of England had that right either, and that is why the Crown of Scotland continues, though nobody ever tells you that. What's happening, our assets are being administered under a trust, under the English Crown, in right of the English Crown by the Anglo-British state, as though we were a Crown dependency. It isn't lawful. The problem is we have an establishment, and I call it the fortress of the official narrative. If enough people say it, if enough judges, if enough lords, if enough MPs, if enough historians and commentators say it, then it must be true. Because how could all those people be wrong? Well, I have a friend who says 1 million flies eat dung. There's a hoax at the heart of this. And so part of what we will have to do to stop this comes back to the sovereignty of the people of Scotland. This is fraud. It isn't legal because the Supreme Court says so. Courts don't make law. Courts interpret law. And, as Neil Hanvey can tell you, the Supreme Court can get it wrong and get it badly wrong in its interpretation. We know that. The law remains the law, and the reason that we are up against a mountain here is for no other reason than that we have been sold what they call a crock. We've been told there's a crown of the United Kingdom. When you look at the first Petroleum Extraction Act, you will see that the right to the minerals, the oil, the gas, the coal, are vested in His Majesty. But that's only under the English Crown, because the monarch isn't the Crown in Scotland. And that crown was never transferred. So we're going to have to challenge the legitimacy of what is essentially an act of criminal fraud by a state against a sovereign territorial nation. And this is going to come as a big shock to most people. It's going to be, well, how can they possibly be wrong? How could you be right about this? We're right about it because that's the law. That's what it says. And it doesn't become right, just, or legal because the plundering, colonizing state says whatever I decide is right and legal is going to be right and legal. So we're going to have to get ready to fight this all the way to the international courts. We're going to have to start looking at issuing notices to everybody involved in these Freeport initiatives and these contracts that they're about to enter into unlawful contracts, and we are going to be challenging them. They will have that notice if they go ahead and the day comes when they go to their international corporate courts and say we entered these contracts in good faith and we're entitled to keep them, and we will say no, you didn't, we told you to begin with. These are the rights of the sovereign territorial nation of Scotland. So I want everyone here to practice saying loudly and as often as you possibly can, the sovereign territorial nation of Scotland. Can I hear it just the once? The sovereign territorial nation of Scotland. That is our basis for challenging this all the way. And it underpins what we are saying about the rights of the sovereign people of Scotland, politically, judicially, and territorially. I'm going to stop in case, because there's a good few speakers and I think a lot of people are going to have questions. Any questions for Sarah? No?
Yeah, how's it going to be funded?
Hi, Sarah. So, why are we just learning about this now? I mean, you know, previous Scottish governments, have they ignored this? Have they just not been aware of it, or what, you know?
I've just actually written an article about this. You've all heard of what they call an ad hominem argument. Well, that means basically, if someone's character can be knocked down, then what they're saying doesn't need to be listened to. So the validity of somebody's character determines the validity of what they're saying. An example of that is if Donald Trump said, "It's raining outside," there's an awful lot of people would assume the sun was shining. It works the other way. Let me give you an example. In the 40s and 50s, or there in America, almost the entire medical establishment was co-opted by the tobacco industry. And there were adverts all over the place telling people how good for your health smoking tobacco was. There was a tiny group of what today would be called conspiracy nuts who kept insisting that there were facts that showed that tobacco smoking is deadly. But they were nutters. Everyone knew they were nutters because the doctors emphatically, reassuringly, confidently, convincingly told them that this was nonsense, how good tobacco smoking was for your health. Eventually, the group of nutters turned out to be decent, committed truth tellers. We all know about that. For early on after the Union, I wouldn't have, if I was complaining about what the British state was doing, I would have had a ready audience, everybody knew. Nobody thought that we were a voluntary partner in a union. By the time of the first Jacobite Rising, everybody knew. Everybody knew that we'd been co-opted. Everybody realised that we had been annexed. But over time, force and attrition and colonisation, oppression, continued for so long that eventually the situation became accepted. We had an establishment completely co-opted by the Anglo-British state. Then we got into the beginning of the United Nations, right after the Second World War. And in the 1950s, the British state was asked about Scotland's status. And the reply that was given, what they did was they held a royal commission headed up by a certain Lord Balfour, who has a great deal to answer for in terms of the terrible situation we're seeing in Israel and Palestine today. He headed up this royal commission, and in chapter 1 it stated, and this is really interesting, Scotland is a nation. It entered the Union as a voluntary partner and not a dependency. Something that is administered under a foreign crown is known as a crown dependency. So that question had been asked. Now, I confirmed with a retired Supreme Court judge recently that that report and that statement was put together and submitted to the international community in response to inquiries. You don't say Scotland is not a dependency unless someone's asked you if it is. That became the established fact, and people accepted it. How many people heard the Scottish Lord Advocate, Dorothy Bain, explaining, as at the beginning and again, more than once in her submission to the Supreme Court, Scotland and England ceased to exist as kingdoms and were replaced by the new kingdom, the United Kingdom of Great Britain. Everybody, did you hear anyone challenge it? Anyone from the Scottish government? Anyone? Because everyone just knows. But the fact is, you don't get a crown, a kingdom without a crown. A crown and a kingdom go together. If you have a kingdom, you have a crown. If you have a crown, you have a kingdom. And since we still have the Scottish crown, and we still have the English crown, we still have the Kingdom of England, and we still have the Kingdom of Scotland. But the English crown has been put in place over the top of Scotland. But this has all been buried. Now, when a Scottish Lord Advocate says that, and nobody challenges it, it's just how it is. But I will tell you this, it is as truthful and as factual as tobacco smoking is good for your health. And it is a matter of everyone has simply believed it. Everyone has accepted it. Everyone knows because the experts have told you, the doctors have told you. And so when the facts come along, nobody can believe them. We've got a big job to do. But the job is to get through to people that just because 1,000 million flies eat dung doesn't mean that's a healthy thing to do.
Thank you.
I'm just thinking about what I was going to say. Yeah, one positive thing I noticed at the SNP conference, the words were uttered, the words that are on your Sterling directive were uttered. And if you noticed, the sovereign people of Scotland, he said it. I've never heard it said before. Do you think he picked it out of there?
I'm absolutely sure that he did. And, you know, I did bang my head pretty hard on the table when I heard it. But one of the things that the First Minister said at the rally in Edinburgh, God help us, was that we really need to make the claim of right law so that the Scottish Parliament can become sovereign. But he said we really need the claim of right. We leave the rest of it out. You know, we just need to go and explain to him that it is already law, that it is a binding, ratified condition of the Union, and that's because of what's coming up through the membership. You know, if you look at what's happened over the last year, when I first stood up and said, what happened to our constitution? What happened, you know, what about the claim of right? For quite some time, there was, what a lot of idiots these people are. Moon howlers, rainbow chasers, you know, this is not this ancient, mouldy document that is nothing to do with anything except religion, which is actually the bit that's fallen away. And look at it now, claim of right. Whether he understands its law or not, and, you know, we'll go and explain it to him. He's talking about it because the people are talking about it. This is what's great about this. This belongs to all of us. This doesn't belong to any party. This is what we can all unite behind. You'll hear it from all politicians now, at last, that it means that we have political sovereignty. And actually, when you translate that through, the right to remove a government and replace it with, and it's not just me saying that as some kind of radical thing, that was what the Claim of Right for Scotland said in 1989. The right to choose the form of government best suited to our needs. Any form. We can have direct democracy. We can have no democracy, God help us. We can have whatever we choose because we're sovereign. That's radical. That's what it means. And this is our land, and we own it. And there is not one damn thing in that treaty, or any of the negotiations leading up to it, that said that what belonged to the Scottish Crown could be transferred to the English Crown. If they weren't going to put together a united Crown, which they couldn't do, they're stuck with the fact that we didn't have a territorial union. Maybe political and economic, no territorial union. And I will point this out. Have you ever heard anyone, including the Lord Advocate, talk about the political, economic and territorial union? Ever? They talk about a full political and economic union, and they leave out the territorial on purpose, because there was no such union. That is a piece of sleight of hand that has just travelled on past. Well, you know, there was a new kingdom and the rights. No, there wasn't. That's Scotland's. And yes, you're right. Things have changed, and people are picking up on it, and that's a very, very good sign.
Anybody else?
Is everything you've just been talking about actually upheld by the Treaty of Union, Article 19?
The Treaty of Union falls on Article 1. Do you know why?
No.
Article 1 of the treaty sets out the purpose of the treaty: to create a single, unified and new kingdom known as the United Kingdom of Great Britain. And that never happened. So you can forget the rest.
That's a good answer.
Can I just ask about the Crown Estate? What is meant by the Crown Estate? I thought of it as being a strip of land at the edge of the sea, but I also have been told that bits of it have been sold off to private people. Could that happen legally, or has it happened legally, or how does that work?
What they've been doing is quietly administering Scotland as a trust under the English Crown. There's nothing anywhere that makes that legal. What they say is we're one kingdom and we can do it that way, and there's one crown. But when you look into it, there is not. So what they say, what the Crown Estate is, it manages the Crown interest. And I'll quote the Crown Estate Commission from 1998. Crown interest means an interest belonging to Her Majesty, not Scotland, in right of the Crown. It should be Crowns, but she's not Queen of Scotland, or she wasn't Queen of Scotland anyway. Or belonging to a government department, or held in trust for Her Majesty for the purposes of a government department. That's how the Crown Estates work. Everything that belongs to the Crown that is not managed by the government is managed by the Crown Estate. The thing is, they pretend that the Crown is the English Crown, and they don't address, and they get round the Scottish Crown by treating it as a trusteeship. Is that clear?
So, is it possible legally to have sold off bits of this estate to private landowners without the agreement of the people, us, beforehand?
It's possible to do it fraudulently and claim that it's legal, and that's what's happened.
That's what I suspected.
Any chance we could discuss Freeports tonight?
I'm done. What I'm explaining is the reason why we have a claim and a way of stopping it. So as I said, what I wanted to talk about, because I have to go, is how do we stop them? What are the grounds that we can use for stopping them? And in order to...
So how are you going to implement it then?
You will have to challenge this all the way, because they will fight tooth and nail. You will have to take this all the way to the international courts. We will have to do that.
The Scottish people.
Well, start with the...
no control over our media whatsoever. How are you getting this message out?
I'm going to hand over for the very exciting argument that's clearly about to follow, and I'll hand over to John and head over here. Unless Neil, would you like to come in here?
Relaxed. I'll speak whenever you want me to.
Yep.
Thanks very much, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.